Aloha, scooter heads. I'm going to try to crank this episode out post-haste because I'm going to old Mexico. Yeah, a couple days ago, the wife says, hey, let's go to Mexico. So here we are, going to Mexico. Now, of course, I can do podcasts down in Mexico, and I hope to. I hope to meet up with fellow scooter heads. I don't know what the roads are going to be like in the particular area where I'm going. Are they going to be cobblestones? Do they even have scooters? We'll figure that stuff out after I get there, and hopefully it will be interesting and I'll have something to report back. But just when I was thinking, what is the topic going to be of the next episode? This episode, I got some feedback on the last episode, and of all people, it's our buddy Timothy West, Electric Scooter Podcast alumni, and he had some things to say, particularly about Dr. Conway, his speech that he gave about how electric vehicles are not necessarily as environmentally friendly as some people may think. So let's run the theme and see what Mr. West up north had to say. By the way, my email address is dagwoodstreets@gmail.com. You can contact me anytime if you think you have a great idea for a topic. Let me know. Shoot me an email. Let me know what you think. If you don't like something I said, if you like something I said, if you just want to go off on a tangent about electric scooters, hey, emails are free. It's just your time. And you don't even really have to type. You know what I do sometimes? I have my computer hooked up so that when I hit the FN button twice, it takes dictation. So I just talk into it and then go back and fix it. So that's an option. You can do that too. I don't know if you're aware of that. You might be aware of it. Timothy West says, it's of course very sad to hear the fires caused by the e-bike batteries and recent deaths, but there are fires caused by many other things that don't garner the same media attention. If it's electric and negative, the media will jump on it. The same can be said when an electric car catches fire. It hits the front page. The numbers don't show the car fires from gas fires during that same time frame. Well, sensationalism sells papers. I'll tell you, I've been to some countries where the newspapers and the journalists are way out there. Taiwan would be an example. They just try to out controversy themselves. They just one up making just outlandish claims. It's interesting and fun to read, but there's just a lot of competition in a lot of places. Since electric vehicles are all in the news these days, whenever anything goes wrong with an electric vehicle, then it's going to make the news. That was my little aside. That wasn't Timothy right there. Now, back to what Timothy had to say. Does it really make more sense to be driving a car with a tank full of highly explosive fuel? I'm old enough to remember the Ford Pinto. Here again is Dagwood Streets stepping in. Yeah, the Pinto, I believe it had a gas tank in the back. So if you got rear-ended hard, poof. I can't imagine that crashing an electric vehicle could be as dangerous as crashing a car full of gasoline. I could be wrong. I'm not a rocket surgeon. Back to Tim. Typical politicians jumping on the bandwagon and causing pain to the less wealthy. Instead, they can invest in education, training about battery, etc. Storage options for apartment buildings. Again, Dagwood speaking here. You could put a special room that has some type of fire retardant to contain any possible fires and allow people to keep their scooters there. That's an option. Back to Tim. Simple timers for battery charging to avoid overcharging or battery management system issues. But no, they jump on and say, ban the electric bikes in apartment buildings. Short-sighted. Okay, I agree with that. I don't see anything in there that I have any issue with, my fellow scooterhead. Number 2, the points made by Professor, I guess technically Dr. Conway, were very similar to big oil talking points. The complete failure to mention that oil is explored, drilled, shipped, and processed at refineries is deceptive. I live by the ocean and see the oil tankers going past, and they belch smoke. OPEC is another issue, a behemoth in its pricing of oil and distribution, and it's bullying countries around the world. Reliance on these petrostates is frightening. Without question, I hope as a society we're on the path to a cleaner future. This, of course, means improving battery manufacturing, mining practices, and embracing cleaner solutions like solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear. See, I infer that Timmy doesn't say nuclear. Folks, it's spelled Nuclear. It's pronounced nuclear. Take the word clear, Clear, and put Nu in front of it. Nuclear, not nuclear. Nuclear. I don't even know what a nucleol is. Dude, it's totally nuclear. It's like so nucleoled out. Sorry, that was a tangent. Timothy is saying we should embrace cleaner solutions like solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear. The fact that nuclear isn't even in the mix is nuts. A few modern nuclear power plants coming online in the next 10 years would solve the issues California is having, but bad media coverage has destroyed the appetite for nuclear power in the USA, it seems. Very sad. Again, I'm totally on board with everything he said. Nuclear power, go for it. Back to Tim. I happen to live in a province that gets its electricity from hydro, over 94%, which does skew my perspective, I admit, but suggesting that people buy complex, very expensive hybrid cars with anemic engines and small batteries is absurd. Okay, he doesn't like hybrid cars. I am not sure I'm 100% on board with that. I don't like the anemic engines. Yeah, I agree. I mean, compare a Prius to a Tesla. Man, those electric cars, they shred. They really have high torque. But it is a way, I'm arguing, this is Dagwood Street's counterpoint to Timothy West, that it helps with range anxiety. It's a way to slowly ease people into electric vehicles. I'm from Hawaii, but I live in Las Vegas, and they're both kind of like an island. Las Vegas, you got to drive 4 hours to go anywhere, right? You're going to go to where? Prescott, Arizona, Flagstaff, Arizona, both 4 or 5 hours. LA, or getting to Riverside, not the border to Riverside County, but, getting down into the valley, you're talking 4 hours. Taking an electric vehicle and hoping that there's going to be an open place at those maybe 2 spots between here and there that you can charge up, and then you're not going to have to wait around for a long time while other people are charging, and they don't just leave it on the charger while they finish eating their meals or whatever, and you're standing out there in the hot sun. There's all kinds of scenarios I can come up with. But a hybrid car, maybe people could buy hybrid cars and that would solve their range anxiety. And then maybe by that time, the automobile companies will have caught up to systems whereby you can drive 4, 5, 6 hours. There's probably a couple out there now, but they're outrageously expensive. Back to Tim. Lastly, Professor Conway completely misses that internal combustion engine cars require more maintenance than electric vehicles. Brakes wear out less on an EV. The complexities of repairing an internal combustion engine car are much higher, and the oil changes, it just goes on and it adds up. Sadly, a very typical big oil talking points hit job, and I'm glad to hear that TED Talks threw up a disclaimer, as it was obviously biased. And then he went on to thank me for the podcast. Those are some great points. The only thing I don't 100% agree with is that hybrid cars are absurd. I think they may have their place. Yeah, I don't know. It could be argued. He has a good point. But I cannot argue with internal combustion engine vehicles having more maintenance than electric vehicles. I mean, I would like to see a number that shows how many moving parts are in a combustion engine compared to an electric vehicle. It's got to be ridiculous. Plus, friction, when parts are rubbing, there's just no way it's going to be as economical. And by economical, I mean a logical way to get the maximum amount of energy from what you're putting into it. There's just no way that a combustion engine stacks up against an EV. Brakes wear less on an EV. That I did not know. I'm not sure how that would be if you're going a certain speed and you hit the brakes. I mean, isn't it going to be the same? Somebody enlighten me. Let me know. Send me an email, or maybe Tim. How is brake wear less on an EV? Now I can see if it's regenerative brakes. Yeah, electronic brakes or something like that, to where you're not wearing down your brake pads. So good points, and I very much appreciate the feedback, and it helps me out because I didn't know what to talk about for this episode. So thank you, Tim West. Make sure to watch Tim's Electric, his channel on YouTube. Buy his products, go to his webpage, help out a fellow scooterhead. That's what I always try to do, whether I'm looking for gloves or a helmet or whatever it is. There are a lot of places on the internet where you can go and purchase the same thing for the exact same price, and instead of it just going into some big fat cat tycoon's pocket so he can afford another condo in Monaco, it goes into a scooterhead like you or me, a guy or a gal, just trying to get by and make a little money doing what they love, spreading joy around the world, and making sure people get more smiles per gallon.
Well, it's time for the news. Electric scooter podcast news. It's time for the news. All right, you get the idea. It's time for the news.
Speaking of heated debates about e-scooters, I came across a YouTube video from GB News. I assume GB is Great Britain because it's out of London. It's called "Is the Law Too Soft on E-Scooters?" Let her rip, tater chip.
Mark Schaffer, if we can start with you, but obviously you've got a commercial interest in this, but I've found in talking to people who run e-scooter businesses before, yes, it's a commercial opportunity, but it's also something they believe passionately in as well. Tell us why you do.
I guess there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I believe that the way that we get around in this country needs a bit of an using 2 tons of steel to travel a mile or two down the road in an urban environment for me, in my opinion, puts a lot of people's lives at risk in terms of pollution and in terms of physics of just, carrying that much weight around on city streets. For me, e-scooters and e-bikes and micromobility, so lightweight electric vehicles, provide us with a solution for this. It's rather than it's a lot of carrot and not much stick in getting people to change their lifestyle, which would be good for everybody.
Mike Rawson, Mark Schaffers, they're laying out the position for e-scooters. We've heard it many, many times, and there'll be many people who are sympathetic to that position. I'm one of them. I think a lot of people get the logic of it. What they don't get is this reluctance on the part of policymakers, and I dare say maybe even some of your former colleagues within the police service, who seem confused about whether they ought to be applying the law, and in not applying it, then people overall take the law less seriously, don't they?
Yes, I do take Mark's point about the personal transport. The problem comes when they don't really mix with vehicular traffic. And I'm afraid my observations have been there's a lot of irresponsible drivers. And I think that's disappointing. But interestingly enough, I know that many people say the police are not interested, but I was looking at the figures, and just under 4,000 were seized last year in London, and I imagine most of them were destroyed.
Mark Schaffer, the way I just laid it out in my introduction there, the fact that you've got 1 million scooters in private hands now, and we've got mainstream businesses marketing them, but not really, I think, pointing out to people the way the law applies to them. We've got a situation effectively where high street businesses are advocating law breaking. I mean, as I say, that's got nothing to do whether you believe in e-scooters or not. It's a problem with the way the law is framed, interpreted by businesses, and then not actioned by our law enforcement officials.
Well, look, Mike makes a good point. Mike's Met Police, I believe in traffic, and he's absolutely right that there's been a national crackdown over the last 6 months into using e-scooters. Most people that you'll meet are perfectly aware that riding privately owned e-scooters isn't necessarily kosher. And in my experience, PET being one of these retailers, we make it very, very clear to everybody that walks in the door. There are disclaimers all over the websites. We make it clear to people that, look, this is your own risk.
You know what's going on, but you've said it. You've just said it. They know it's probably not kosher. I mean, that's not a sustainable position for a law-abiding country.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I believe that both Mike and myself are in agreement. We need regulation. We need the government to act. We've had plenty of time with these trials running that have proved again and again that e-scooters are as safe as bicycles. The performance envelope is roughly the same, the weight is the same, and providing they're ridden with care, with crash helmets and possibly an ID scheme, we can make this perfectly safe. Nothing is 100% safe. Walking isn't 100% safe, but within the all probability, it's going to be as safe as cycling.
Yeah, there were 133 serious injuries last year from the use of e-scooters. The number of fatalities rose by a factor of 3 as well. There will be people who say, well, look, there are nearly 2,000 fatalities on our roads in cars and motorbikes. It's just, if millions of people want to get around, that's a price we have to pay. As I say, that's a separate issue from the fact that the law is being made to look foolish here. And I think that's a really slippery slope for society to go down. If, as Mark says, people know it's not really kosher, businesses shrug their shoulders, the police turn a blind eye, that's not a great state of affairs. Where does that take us?
It's a difficult one because it's a pretty new concept, isn't it? And I think it's overtaken the ability of the legislators to deal with it. If I could just make 2 points. Personally, I would like to see the maximum speed of these scooters in built-up areas 5 miles an hour. That's about, because 15 miles an hour, which is legal, they're covering about 7 metres every second, and that's not good on footways, and that's why they're banned from footways. But getting back to the retailer's responsibility, I would like to see the law made so that retailers must supply the purchaser with a list of legal do's and don'ts, where they can and cannot be used. And I would like the purchaser to sign a declaration to say they've received that and that they commit to passing that information on to the person to whom they're going to give the scooter, because scooters are obviously given as presents to youngsters. So let's try and tighten up the responsibility, and let's try and do away with this, because there's no doubt about it. Many of them are using them on the roads. And I believe that some of them don't realise that actually that's illegal. If you want to use one, you must hire one. And isn't it strange how you can legally use one if you hire it, but you can't legally use it if you own it? And I have a struggle getting my head around that.
Well, as we struggle with that, Mike, just hold that thought. Hold your thoughts for a second. Ella Whelan's alongside me and is a person of strong opinions about most things, but this in particular. Mike makes a good point, though, doesn't he, that the legislation hasn't kept up with the pace of technological advancement here. That's one thing. He makes the point about the speed limit, 15 miles per hour for rental scooters. I'm reading about scooters doing 50 miles an hour being used by criminals who steal phones and they're gone in moments. To give one example of how we're not keeping up with the tech.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've had that before. I mean, moped theft was a big thing not so long ago.
Harder to get your hands on a moped?
Yes, but indeed, you know, I once got my phone nicked off me with someone who's very fast on a bike. Things like that happen in built-up areas, particularly in London. And indeed, I live in Hackney, and I'm sick of trying to chase people on e-scooters off the street. I'm also sick of trying to chase cyclists off the street. So there is, you know, the pavement has been open to a lot of bad behaviour recently. But I think it's pretty clear-cut on this, that I very much support Mark's point about technological innovation. Now, I'm not quite ready to give up my van for the environment yet, because try getting a big shop home for your family on an e-scooter is probably going to be more dangerous, even if you are going 5 miles an hour. But the idea of people being able to easily get around, particularly a city, is a wonderful thing. What needs to happen is they need to be treated, actually, as both speakers made the point, in the same way that motorbikes or bikes do, in line with the the highway code, and with people understanding the personal responsibility that if you get on something as precarious looking as an e-scooter without the relevant precautions, going too fast, and something happens to you, then that is a risk you take. I think there's a little less sort of a risk-averse approach to this, and a more serious sense of what actually can we do to allow people to enjoy these things and also stop infuriating pedestrians like me.
That's all that matters. Let's go briefly a final word to Mark Schaffer and Mike Rawson as well. Mark, to you first. I mean, wonderful you've set up a business, wonderful you've chosen a business that's almost like a Klondike, isn't it, selling e-scooters? I'm sure lots of people are trying to do it. You must worry, however, that the success is happening too quickly, and that means, as Mike Rawson made clear, that the legislators are not keeping pace with what's actually going out of your door.
Well, funnily enough, due to the police crackdown, I mean, business hasn't been particularly good. Anyone wondering whether the police are being effective or not only has to speak to a guy like me, who has been in a little bit of trouble for the last 6 months, because ultimately anyone who was sensible riding these things went back in their cars. And that's a tragedy. And, and ultimately, government policies define who's using scooters now. And, that's what we need to change. We need to get sensible people who want to use this technology, give them a regulatory framework they can do it safely.
Mike Rawson, final words from you. If you could wave your magic wand, would you just abolish e-scooters? Bad idea, full stop?
I tend to think that might be a bit harsh. People do enjoy them. But for me, the bottom line is safety. And we have to put the safety of the public as a priority. And I do think we can address the issue by reducing the speed down to 5 miles an hour. in built-up areas where there are people. I don't know what Mark would think to that suggestion, but if you were hit by a scooter doing 5 miles an hour, it wouldn't do you a lot of good. But if you were hit by one doing 15 miles an hour, particularly if you're elderly, it could do you a great deal of harm.
5 miles an hour? Is that dude off his rocker? That is nuts. Who's going to commute on a scooter that's going 5 miles per hour? Let's talk about a couple things here. For one, I apologize for the audio, although the audio is not my fault. That is the original source. It was horrible. It just kind of moggles my mind and boggles my mind that these professional organizations, and I won't call them out, well, there's one right there that we just heard, GBN, that have professional sound guys, and this is what they come up with? Come on. I'm just an unfrozen caveman podcaster with the most rudimentary of tools, and I try to take pride in my audio. If your audio doesn't sound good, who wants to listen? Who wants to watch? Who wants to pay attention? But there were some good points made during that interview, and I didn't jump in like I usually did because I felt all sides were represented. But let me talk about a couple things specifically before we wind up this episode, because we're about to end. One great point was in England and Australia and other places. How crazy is it that it's legal to rent and illegal to ride a private scooter? So side by side, a privately owned scooter, person has a helmet on, they know how to ride their scooter, it belongs to them, they're keeping on top of the maintenance themselves, they know whether it can handle going up and down a curb, they know the lean angles, they have experience on that scooter. Illegal. A person with no helmet who just hops onto a scooter they've never ridden before. They may have never even ridden a scooter before. Legal. Explain to me the logic in that. Next point. Danger/safety. That's a bad argument. Because if you are comparing electric scooters to either bicycles or even worse, cars, I think the electric scooter wins. And as far as overall health hazard, look how heavy cars are. If that runs into you, what's going to hurt worse? I don't care if you're elderly or not. A 2,000-pound and more car or a light little scooter. And how about long-term air pollution? Isn't that slowly killing all of us? The lady mentioned something early on in the interview. I was kind of joking. I'd like to spend less time chasing scooters off the sidewalk. Really? How old are you, lady? That's where you are in life, that you see, whether they're children or adults, on scooters doing something that you have learned or you think is not within the law, and you're just going to call out to them? I know at the age I am, I'd be very disappointed in myself if I found myself at this age shouting at strangers for breaking really insignificant laws. That's kind of ridiculous. Another point was that people are returning to cars due to the crazy restrictive laws. So people would be non-polluting, leaving up lots of parking spots, less traffic on the road, but because of the laws, they're driving cars. There are people who've even bought scooters and got disappointed. There was a couple scooterhead listeners down in Australia who told me they were switching just because the laws were ridiculous against scooters. Very biased, very prejudiced. So that's somebody who was not polluting. Actually, they switched to e-bikes, so they're still not polluting. But you get my point, right? 5 miles per hour. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's been a lot of fun for me. Pretty easy episode. I'm outdoors, by the way, practicing for when I'm on the road so I can continue producing quality podcasts about scooters for you scooter heads. So if you hear traffic and wind noises and stuff, that's what you're hearing right now. I'm out by a swimming pool. And look out for a video from Tim West. We had an episode, let's see, was it episode before last or last episode, where we talked about how lithium batteries from e-bikes and or scooters set fires to apartment buildings. Well, Tim, as it would have, has a video coming out addressing exactly that. How to store your e-bike in an apartment. Actually, by the time this episode's released, that video will probably be out. So look for that. And the entrepreneurial Ginger on Wheels, support him. He's got a bunch of products coming out. He's got a PEV light that's already available. He's working on Ginger Goo that's going to go inside your tires and help prevent flats. And I don't know, rumor is he may be working on a couple other products. So stay tuned for that. Until the next episode, keep shiny side up, dirty side down. That means wear a helmet if you're going over 20 miles per hour or you're in a tricky area. Wear a full face helmet. In fact, full face helmet is preferable anyway. Aloha.